catch-up time. And this one, I'm going to go a little different because it's been ages since we had a little chat about how it's been going. And I fished a lot of matches since last time we've done this. So what I'm going to do instead, I just want to focus on one, and I want to focus everything about the FA Super Cup final that we've just fished up at Woodlands Fish. In fact, no, the whole run-up sort of to the final. In that I was very lucky to qualify up here. It was actually at Isaac Watland. I managed to sneak through the last round in the Staffordshire region, which put me through to that. And it's been a right weird one, a really, really weird, unknown sort of element, because no one's ever fished this sort of final before. And there was all unknown whether it was even going to go ahead or whatever, because it was just new. No one knew the crack what was going on. And Steve Dawkes, who has done I'll come into the job that Steve's done in running this at the end, but he's done a phenomenal job all the way through. And we all never knew how it was going to be. The unknown was massive in this event. But anyway, we snuck through to the final in Staffordshire region. So what it came all about was fishing Woodlands Fish, where the final was due to be held, which is a venue I've fished a little bit, but only ever in big matches in qualifiers, when venues definitely fish in a completely different way to the norm, and you get the false impression sort of thing of how them venues are because of that unique environment a qualifier creates with the amount of people. So I started going up there a bit, and I think I fished about 4 or 5 matches. The first one I fished was a pairs match where I fished with the boss, Craig Kent, who's the gaffer up at Woodlands. And he kindly let me go on Partridge and Skylark. That was one section, and the back lakes was another section. I'll run through the matches dead quick, because the first one then I drew 32 or 33 on Partridge, and that was the first look I had with a bit of room at how the lakes could potentially, in the way that they were going to potentially be on the final, and it was really good. It became evident I'm not going to say there were plenty of fish to be caught, because they're big, they're massive. Fish at Woodlands now are ridiculous. They're all, apart from the ends, £5 a baby. I mean, other than the end pegs, if you're within the lake, so Woodlands is just square lakes. If you're away from the ends, £5 a little fish, they're massive. So it's all about patient, clever carp fishing. And you felt that there were fish around in your peg all the time, but they were very, very difficult to get a bite on late on. And that was the biggest lesson I learned, in that it was probably 3 hours of patient ticking over, catching a fish in any way you could by introducing minimal bait with whatever you were doing. And then a couple of hours at the end when they put their heads down, had a feed, be it shallow, long on deck on a method. It could have been anything that they fed on. And it was keeping your eyes open and working out how they were feeding on the day. That was the first lesson I learned. I had a lovely day the first day. The first time I drew on there, I had 17 fish for £160, I think. I might be wrong. But I think it was £159 I think I had with 17. So a big, massive fish. And that was about 4th in the match, but it was 2nd on Skylark and Partridge. They won my section. I think me and Craig snuck in 4th overall with, I think Dan and Ryan Bennett won it, but they might not have. I think they did. I apologise if they didn't, it was ages ago. So anyway, that was my first look at it. After that, I fished 3 or 4 opens, and it was right weird how moody the lake seemed to be, in that you couldn't predict how they were going to fish. I mean, at that time, there was a lot of pressure with festivals going on and lots of regular club matches and whatnot. So the carp weren't feeding. And also that time of year as well, it was, what it'll have been? It'll have been middle of August, wasn't it, when we were, yeah, middle of August, sort of. Start of September, but really hot weather. So not carpy feeding time at all. But every time you went, it'd be different. And I had a great run of results. My confidence was a joke after being there for half a dozen matches, because I literally never had a bad match. It was just, I seemed to click with it, and it sort of suited my really negative way of fishing and patient way. But I kept having different ways I was catching, in that I managed to I drew 8 on Skylark in one of the open matches that again was on Skylark and Partridge, and I managed to win that with, I think I had 17 fish that day for £135, and they were all mugged and caught short late on. Whereas the next match I drew on Partridge, I drew 31 on Partridge, which is the middle area of Partridge again. That match I fished shallow all day. I fished shallow most of the day, catching a few fish within my feed, which was something that hadn't happened before that. The fish were moving away from your feed, but on this day they came in, and I caught quite a few in my feed. That were an even better day again. I think I had 22 fish that day for £177, which won that match. So I've been there twice, or within 2 matches I'd won them both. I thought, I'm going to get beat. My confidence was massive. And I think I went once more. I went once more. and I drew partridge again, and I drew peg 23 on partridge, which up to then it had been quite civilised, the matches. Like that 177 that I caught, that was probably the best weight that had been caught for a while. No, there was 180, but that sort of weight was brilliant. And then after that, it was sort of 130, 120 was there or thereabouts, which I thought, that's doable off every peg, so I was really, really feeling it. But then this one match, we went there on a Saturday to fish in open, and it was the day after a festival. So it had 5 days of pressure with getting fish for every day, loads of bait going in. I thought, this is going to be moody. It's going to be a tricky, they're not going to feed, it's not going to be solid. It's going to be the same, 100, 120, 130 pound. I was completely wrong, it fished unbelievably. So I was up top in the partridge where the wind was blowing the other way. The wind was blowing to peg 2 and peg 37 where Aidan was on peg 2 and John Kenning, I think his name is. I'm sure it was John Kenning, was on the end on 36 or 37, 36, which is the opposite end of the lake. And up our end, it's been just how it has normally been, in that you pick a few off mugging, catch an odd one short later on, catch an odd one in the edge later on. And I had a nice day. So I think I had 15 that day for 126 pound, which were 4/5 of the match, but peg 2 and peg 36, where John was. Aidan had 220 off peg 2, and then opposite on peg 36, I'm going to say. John Kennan had 300, I think he had 330 or 350 pound, ridiculous. And he's cut down the edge on groundbait and maggots all day, so it showed that despite it having this pressure, there's days when these big lads just want to feed. And it was weird because there was no difference in weather or anything like that. It was a bit of a breeze, but if anything, I didn't fancy it to be a feeding day. It was quite still, high pressure, but they chewed the brains out. So it showed that things were starting to change. Then big carp was starting to have a little bit of a munch, and potentially anything could happen. So then that were it for me. That was my last match. There was one other match after that. There were 2 other matches after that, on the Sunday and the Wednesday, and the weights went back down again. So I think Pimmy win it with 109 pound on the Sunday, and then I think 120 or 130 pound won it on the Wednesday leading up to it. So I was like, oh right, so it's back to normal now. That was just an anomaly, that one where they caught a load of fish. So I thought I was going into it really, really, really happy. So practice done, what we felt we knew what we were going to do. Rock up on the draw, and yeah, talking about the final and all that, and how I've got to say with Steve, he's definitely not it doesn't work how he says it's going to work. Everything's a bit erratic, to say the least. But all he's ever trying to do is make things as good as they can possibly be. Yeah, it's just a lovely atmosphere, all laid back, not bitchy, too professional. It's nice. It's just enjoying fishing, having a laugh. And even the draw, that's what it was about. I mean, traffic had made a few people late, so things had to be held back a little bit, but it was all lovely, laid back, just a pleasant evening where it's not. I've been in plenty of other finals before, and there's a big stressful element where I hate the drawing side of things, but this was a bit different. It was lovely, laid back, up in the Watermill pub, which is at Woodlands, which were phenomenal. I mean, they put on food for us for the evening. It was amazing. So the draw went. Before we talk about the draw, we were given our clothing, which I've been in lots of finals again. We've been given all sorts of clothing, and it's always, have a bit of clothing. With this, it's the best stuff that Halcon Hunt stuff do. I mean, we were all given proper Gore-Tex kecks, proper windstopper fleeces, all embroidered. A joke, like a literal joke. There must be 300, 400, 500 quid worth of clothing each competitor were given just to fish one event. You know, it didn't even rain on the day, so we didn't even use a coat. We had t-shirts on. But there was no expense spared, definitely, for all the finalists, just to make it a pleasant event. I mean, really, really enjoyable with minimum stress. But anyway, that out of the way, onto the draw, and I drew peg 10, which on the day was an M peg. We had 10 anglers on Skylark and 11 anglers on Partridge, the 21 in the final. So Partridge is a little bit bigger, so it worked out all right with 2 miss 1, single peg, 2 miss 1. Bit scatty, but fair. No one had a clue, really, where you wanted to be on the day. And I've drawn N peg on Skylark, which is Skylark 16, peg 10 on the day. I really, really fancied it. Although I'd never been on an N peg leading up to that. So I knew it was different because you had the option of throwing a feeder up to the boards at the end or the banking at the end. But they notoriously held much smaller fish. I'd say because you're on the corner of a square lake, if you upset them too much, you can easily lose your fish. They can go out your peg and you can struggle to catch. But I did have this extra option, which I was more than happy with. I really did feel that if I could have my normal match of catching shallow, short, maybe some in the edge, and if that all went tits up, I could chuck that and catch a few. I thought, yeah, I've got a really good chance there of catching the 120 to 130 pound that I thought would be there or thereabouts. I thought, yeah, that'll be enough to win on the day. Obviously, stupid field, loads of mega anglers in the final who was in final. Andy Power, Stu Fotheringham drew his favourite peg, so that was always a bit of pressure. He was behind me on 20 on partridge. The M peg, same peg as mine, but on partridge, the M peg on partridge. Mega peg. We thought Stu had a really good chance. So obviously, Andy Power, Johnny Winkup. Who else was in final? Chris Weeder. That's just going down the lake. I'm sorry if I'm forgetting everyone. It was a joke. Dale's down there. Everyone's in final. I mean, no disrespect to anyone missing anyone out. You felt like anyone could catch fish from anywhere, but I really did fancy where Zach had drawn. So on the morning, we're queued up on that peg 36 where John Kennan had the big weight a few weeks ago. It just looked the same as it did that day. Like loads of fish, the scum down that end a little bit. It just looked a bit good. But it is what it is. These finals, surprises happen, and there was always going to be more pressure down that lake than anywhere else with spectators, people walking. So I felt it might start good, and I thought they'd disappear. But anyway, what happens down that end. There's nothing I could do about it. My match was a right weird one. I went out with, there weren't many fish visible at all to start with, but I thought I'm just going to fish shallow because there was no feeding, there was no bubbling or anything like that. I thought I'm just going to go and slap a pellet or swing a pellet, because a big thing had been they didn't like noise. So the constant slapping of a pellet wasn't right. They just wanted a gentle laying in of your rig on the top all the time with a long lash. So I've started off doing that. And that allowed me to not feed anything, just flick my rig in the same area. But if I saw one, I could just go to it, which I was seeing a very odd one. One every 10 minutes, you'd see a bit of a, not an obvious mugger, but just a bit of a, you could tell there was a fish there. And by being really patient doing that, I had a phenomenal first hour and 45, maybe 2 hours, that I picked off 12 fish. I mean, both over me spot and around. I got up to 12 fish, and I reckon after an hour and a half, hour and 40, maybe 2 hours, I've had 80 to 90 pounds. And I'm like, what's going on here? I ain't getting beat. Not being cocky at all, but in my head, I was like, wow, I couldn't have ever asked for more than this in the match I thought it was going to be. And at that point, it was that match as well. It was the 120 pound match, because from what I could see, no one was catching anything. So I thought I had a mega start. And then things just changed. I mean, the conditions changed, the fish sort of changed, a bit more pressure with people up our end or whatever else, whatever you put, the fish just all of a sudden changed. As they do, Big Cap. What I kept saying, it's 2 different matches, and halfway through or just before, a few fish started to put their heads down on deck, and I couldn't see any anymore. I stopped seeing any muggers, so that became not an option. Fishing shallow wasn't really an option. I wasn't going to catch slapping shallow on Skylark. It didn't really work on there. So I had a bit of a pooey hour that I struggled to find my way for the middle hour of the match. I really, middle 45 minutes, really struggled. Didn't catch anything. I had a quick go short, quick go long on deck, didn't catch a fish. So I fed me edge. Just past the next pallet, which I could because that was the end. And while I fed me edge, I threw a feeder up the bank. And it's been all right on a feeder. I've caught a couple. I think I've missed one. I've lost one that did me in the brambles. And although you'd have to be patient, you will get an odd bite. I think I've had like 3 or 4 in half an hour, but only little diddy ones, only these little 2 to 2.5 pounders, which it just wasn't good enough. At that point of the match, when I knew it needed to be good later on, it just wasn't fast enough or good enough. So I thought, right, need to come off that, bin that. And I've literally focused on my edge and my short line that I've been feeding with pellets, which that's a massive mistake, but I'll come into that in a minute. So my short line, I plugged away, my edge line. I've caught an odd fish. I think I've had another 6 or 7 fish throughout the match down the edge. And there were signs with mud puffing up and just little signs all the time that the fish were coming in. But for whatever reason, bait choice, whatever, I don't know, I fed maggots down there mostly with a few micros, or positioning where I did it, something wasn't quite right. And also being in the corner, they were much smaller fish when I got one. I only had one big one and the rest were sort of 3, 4, 5 pound, which sounds decent, but for woodlands, they're babies, utter babies, compared to everyone else's fish that are sort of 6, 7 and 8 pound. And my short line never got going, because that one I was stubborn and I thought, just feed pellets there, don't change it or anything, just catch them 2 or 3 fish on pellets. I didn't do that. I should have fished maggots there instead. That was definitely a big downfall for me, and it just wasn't right to get me over the line and catch enough. So I've ended up with £149. That's ended up third on the day, which won me section, mega, 500 quid. But I definitely went home thinking I should have done better. I mean, I couldn't have won the match, definitely not. My peg wasn't worth another £60, not in a million years. I should have definitely beat Chris Reedy, who was second, though he was a couple of pegs down. He fished a lovely, I was going to say patient negative match, but he fished a very positive, lots and lots and lots of maggots and drag fish into your peg sort of match, which was right. That's the way they were feeding. They wanted to eat on maggots. He fished a phenomenal match from where he was. And then, of course, Zach on the end, 21.36, on the end peg on partridge, had very similar, in that he really struggled all day to put anything in the first 2.5, 3 hours. But last 2 hours, he's done a serious job to hold his nerve and get utter job done. Apparently, I've not seen any footage yet of Zach, but I think he's had a few down the edge, and then his short line's gone absolutely phenomenal in the last hour and a half on maggot short, which had been a little sneaky method a few lads had sussed out leading up to it, and he's caught, I think he's had £150 last hour or something stupid short to go home with £100,000, which, it's ridiculous, isn't it? 100 grand for a fishing match. And I must say, it's the most pressure I've ever felt during a match. By a million mile, I've never experienced that you're fishing for 100 grand before. It's stupid. But fair play to Steve Dawkes. What an event he's created. And I'll honestly say, fishing-wise, and comfort and enjoyment-wise, other than stressing that you're fishing for 100 grand, probably the best final I've ever been in. I mean, the fishing, it was a bit nice not knowing what was going on, because there weren't the bank runners, there wasn't the buzz going around of he's catching. The unknown was there all day, which, for a spectator side of things, I don't know how that was. That was Facebook Live that covered all that sort of thing, but I obviously couldn't see that. From an angler side of things, not knowing, I loved it. I mean, I really like knowing and always being able to feel that you've got a chance, not thinking, oh, he's won, it's game over, like it has been in some finals. It was really nice not knowing. It was like a proper fishing match, which is that's what you want in a big final for me. The spectacle's very important, yes, but to create a fishing match for the anglers, that is what it did. And both the organisation and the venue as well, they let nothing down. They were absolutely amazing. And for me, I can't wait to try again next year. So if you haven't had a little look, it's well worth having a nosy at them tickets. And I can't recommend any more than any other competition I've been in, having a little dabble of that one, because the excitement and just the event itself is well worth it.